Hello, everyone. Welcome to Module 2.2 on our COMSAL3D workshop. Today, we'll talk about the contact energies in more detail, and I'll work through an example of epithelial to mesenchymal transition, how we can induce the kind of process that you see here on the bottom using this plugin. And we're going to go into more details about exactly how the contact energies work inside COMSAL and what are their effects. Okay, so remember that this meeting is being recorded on Zoom and transmitted live at YouTube, so you can see it later for you to review. As always, here at the splash screen of the Zoom logistics, feel free to use the buttons yes, no, go slower, go faster, as we as I present today's module. Put any question or your needs that you have on the chat, okay? We always do a quick poll for completion after the exercise. There will be about 8 exercises today, sorry, for this module, okay? A copy of these slides have been already emailed to you early in the morning or the beginning of the day. And we'll be do 2 model building exercises very quickly. And the second one that you do, you can actually just reuse the ones that we have done yesterday. And again, you don't need to actually write the code. The code is already available. The 2 codes that will be used for this module will be already available to you. You can just go to student materials and download them. It should be 2.21.zip and 2.27.zip. These are the 2 files that we using today. So the plan for this module is to give actually, the first item here should not be here. Is we actually are gonna, well, yeah, a brief contact energy overview, right? Without entering into many details. Then I'm gonna give a motivation. Okay, what is gonna be the biological model that we want to well, reproduce in your simulations using contact energies, okay? And then we're going to go step-by-step exercise to use that model to illustrate how the contact energy works. And then I'm also going to switch to a different type of exercise where you go back to a single cell simulation, and we're going to use that to explore other features of the contact energy, how it's used, and what it can do in COMSAL, right? So last time on module 1.3, we talked about the energy constraints, right? So we made a simulation of a single cell, and we turn off all those 4 plugins, okay? And then the volume, surface, and length plugin, they all do different things. One makes the cell keep its volume, the other makes the cell have a target surface, right? Our target perimeter in 2 dimensions. And the last one is forcing kind of aspect ratio to your cell, so it becomes elongated if you choose a target length that's much bigger than what you expect, then the cell would have it was have a round shape, right? And they all work by having this kind of Hookean law. I already said that enough times last time, but just remind you, it's given by a deviation from the actual value of that you're modeling from its target value square, and then you have a weight in front of it. It will be the Lagrange multiplier or the lambda property, lambda volume, lambda surface, and lambda length. That's going to give you the weight of this property with respect to the other ones, and also with respect to the noise of level in your system or the temperature of your system. Okay. Now, one thing that we did not talk much, and I kept saying that's going to be talking to you today, is a contact energy. Okay, so it's a very important plugin. You have already seen a little bit on the last model when Jim was talking. Well, when Hayden was talking about doing the exercise of cell sorting, right? And you have already seen early this morning, okay, when James is talking about the addition and differential addition hypothesis or cell sorting. And today we're going to go in more details of what the contact energy do, okay? So it's a plugin that works different from the other. It has not the formulas of that kind of hook and spring like a module is quite different. And it can be used to do many things in our cells. Okay, so and because it can do many different things, is a little bit more, it takes a little bit more of effort and attention to really understand what will be the impact that that plugin will have when it changes parameters. So among other things, what the content energy can do is first to smooth the cell surface when the cell is alone by itself. So that's what we have seen yesterday on module 1.3 when we saw that the presence of contact energy plugin was making the cell to have a more smooth interface. So that's definitely something that it does. Other thing that it can do is can also tell whatever cells at the same time would like to actually condense together or spread away from each other. Okay, that will be what we most exploring today. And the other things that the contact energy can do, it can also set a content preference or hierarchy of preference between cells of different types. So if you have a simulation of many cells of different types, like you have in the simulation of the cell sorting, the contact energy plugin will have a different value for each pairwise interaction between different cell types and also between cells of the same type. So by choosing those values for each one of those combinations, you can set, okay, which types of cells cell A would like to be in contact with. So does cell A like to be in contact with cell B more than cell C? And cell B, does it like prefer more to be in contact with cell A than cell C or reverse? So you have a matrix of interactions between your cells when they are in contact, and that is set up by the contact energy. So this is already telling that we are talking about the number of parameters go with the square of the number of cell types that you have in your simulation, right? And the other thing that also that you saw on module 1.4 from Hayden and James talk a little bit more today on module 2.1 is that the way you set the hierarchy and the values of those different contact energies between cells of different types can determine what will be the end pattern that a mixture of cells will have after you let your system evolve, okay? So you can see here that contact energies do a lot of things, okay? And today the plan is we're gonna explore what the cells the same type tend to condense to spread. So that's a very simple user case of how those contact energies work. And then I'm gonna switch back to a single cell and talk a little bit more in depth about what the contact energy does to the shape of a single cell. Okay, so there are no comments or questions in the chat. So I'm gonna just move on back to our overview, and we'll do now our motivation epithelial to mesenchymal transition, right? So yesterday I talked a little bit about the huge diversity in cell shapes, right? And I also talk about that usually cells can be classified into two types, okay? So of course, there are many ways that you can classify a cell, okay? But in morphology wise, you can classify them in actual function, you can also classify them as a mesenchymal or epithelial cells, okay? And then epithelial cells are usually cells that are part of an epithelia, okay? So part of a tissue, a wall of cells, and those cells are highly tight with its neighbors. They make adhesion junctions and other types of side junctions with other cells. So they're highly packed, and they usually have a very stereotypical shape within its tissue. So they're usually cuboidal, but also can have different shapes, but they are very stiff and, well, not stiff, but their shape is very well determined. Once the cell is part of an epithelia and it has a particular shape, it usually stays like that, and the cells usually don't divide much, right? In development, cells that make an epithelial layer can still do a lot of things, can be still be very active, but once the body is already fully developed, the cells in that form an epithelium tends to stay put there, unless there's some kind of wound, or then that triggers the cell to actually make a response, and then the cell becomes dynamic. The other type of cells in this classification will be the mesenchymal cells, and the mesenchymal cells are very they have a very dynamic and star-like shape, so they are very they can move around, they can interact with other cells. The mesenchymal cells are your fibroblasts and many immune cells in your body that have to walk around your body to find and fight infections. They are mesenchymal, they have to move around, change shape, engulf your the threat that is in your body. So they have a very dynamic shape and have a very different, they look very different from an epithelial cell. So if you look at the microscope, you can readily tell whether it's an epithelial cell or a mesenchymal cell. So the next slide has a little bit more information about what are the key characteristics between an epithelial cell and a mesenchymal cell. Okay, so you can usually call that a cell is an epithelial state or a mesenchymal state. And those arrows here, EMT here and MET here, indicate that once the cell is an epithelial cell can actually switch type to a mesenchymal cell, and a mesenchymal cell can also switch type back to an epithelial cell. So the first transition is called epithelial to mesenchymal transition, okay? And the other one is going to be a mesenchymal to epithelial transition. So the cell along its life can actually switch back and forth between those two states if there is a need for it, if there's some kind of external factor that induces the cells to have this response, okay? And this happens a lot during development. So the cells, of course, for a body to develop, the cells have to undergo many changes, okay? They not only have to grow and proliferate, they also have to change their types and differentiate into other cell types. So, for example, the first kind of change that an epithelial cell can have is they can go from a mature epithelia to back to kind of immature state and then redifferentiate into a different kind of epithelium. So this is epithelial to epithelial transition, okay? But you also have the epithelial to mesenchymal transition that I talked before. The first one, when you have early development, you have a primitive epithelia, right? And then those cells have to differentiate into a mesenchymal state. They can move throughout your body and go to another part of the developed body and then make a secondary epithelia on that place. So you can think about the neurocrest cells right after gastrulation, they are epithelial, and then after you have your neurotube formation, those cells at the top of the neurotube, they become mesenchymal cell, they actually move along the tube to other parts of the body, and then assemble together and make a second epithelia and from another part of the body. So that happens a lot during development. The other type of epithelial mesenchymal transition is when this secondary epithelia actually differentiate to make another cell type, and what you have here is the fibroblast. Okay, and the other thing that can happen is that you have some kind of epithelial cells that actually are growing, which actually is cancerous. Okay, and they can actually undergo a mesenchymal to epithelial transition. Sorry, epithelial to mesenchymal transition, become a kind of a moving cell, a fibroblast or metastatic tumor cell that can move to your body. Okay. And the problem is that once it does that, it can actually revert, and just like here, and undergo to a mesenchymal to epithelial transition and from the secondary tumor on another place of the body. So this epithelial to mesenchymal transition followed by mesenchymal to epithelial transition is a hallmark of cancer, right? It's something that you want to prevent. And usually the studies are focused on the very first part. People don't want your epithelial to undergo a mesenchymal transition, because when that happens, is that when your cell can actually spread in your body. So this is bad, and this is something that you don't want to happen. So if you have a cancer, and you want to treat this cancer, you want to make sure that your treatment will not induce an epithelial to mesenchymal transition, because then that would be very bad. And I remember from 10 years ago that there was some kind of discussion that a happy cancer tumor means a happy patient. I do not know if people still believe that. And the idea here is that you don't want to disrupt your cancer in a way that's going to cause the cells to undergo mesenchymal to epithelial transition, or sorry, an epithelial to mesenchymal transition and have your cancer spread. So you have to be very careful of the way you treat your cancer because you want to prevent that. So there has been a lot of work on this epithelial to mesenchymal transition, and this is something that you actually can model in your simulations. And a final note here is that this epithelial to mesenchymal transition, I have been talked about that as if it's a all or nothing switch, but that is definitely not true. Okay, the division between epithelial and mesenchymal, or these two categories, are not absolute categories. It's just more like a convenient way to describe how the cells behave. What we have in reality is that epithelial mesenchymal, there is a spectrum of epithelial to mesenchymal kind of like characteristics, and at any point in development, a cell can be more epithelial-like or more mesenchymal-like. So there is a kind of continuous transition between one type and the other type. So usually, early in development, when you talk about, we are seeing epithelial tissues in development, right? They're usually kind of in between epithelial and mesenchymal type, right? Because the cells still have to grow a lot and duplicate a lot, and even go back to mesenchymal state to do something else. It's only later in the adult life or remote cellular organs that the cells actually lock in a epithelial phenotype, okay? But still, that can still be temporary, is not forever locked. If there's some kind of wound or some kind of other external perturbation, the cells can kind of fluidize, okay, become a bit more mesenchymal to make a proper response, okay, to this external perturbation, right? So it's actually a continuous transition between an epithelial-like state and a mesenchymal-like state, and you can find cells all in between the spectrum, okay? And they can be in different points of the spectrum by having different characteristics on and off. So a cell that's right here in the middle can be very different from another cell that also sits in the middle, because their mesenchymal-like properties can be different from the other cell, that mesenchymal-like properties of the other cell, okay? There's some good comments from James in the chat here if you want to take a look. All right, so this kind of epithelial to mesenchymal transition is what we're going to be modeling today. We're going to make a simple model of this process. And what will be driving this process here will be changes in your contact energy plugin that we'll be exploring today. So let me now move to the next step, which is actually, let's do some exercise. Let's make a model of mesenchymal, epithelial to mesenchymal transition, okay? And let's go over it. So I don't want to spend too much time on building the model. I'm gonna just show here in the slides how you do it. You can, if you want to do it by yourself, you can just follow the instructions here on the screen. If you don't want to do it by yourself, you can just go to study materials and download the file 2.2.1.zip, okay? And you already have the simulation ready for you to go. Okay, so let's create a new project. So CompuServe3D, so open your Tweedit editor, go CompuServe3D project, new CompuServe3D project, enter there, okay? Give a name now to your simulation. Okay, this is a kind of old. So this should be, let's give your simulation name module 2_2 EMT, okay? In whatever folder you want, and let's leave the Python plus XML simulation type option, okay? Hit continue. You can name your simulation whatever you want, as long as you don't have spaces. Actually, here I have a space, so this would be bad. Although here I don't have. So no spaces, no don't start for number and don't have funny characters there, okay? So hit continue, all right? Then on this splash screen about the lattice dimensions and the way you initialize, this time you don't need to change anything. Let's just leave it is and hit continue, okay? So again, as always, the previous step is still mentioned here on the, you see the history of what we have been doing. Hit continue. Back, you go to the next wizard. So, okay, let's add a cell type. Again, you have to give a name. So in this case, I just gave the name my cell. Okay, it can be whatever you want. It can be your name. It can be Bob. It can be Maria. So here, if you want to do together with me, let's just call the type my cell. So remember, you have to type the name here and hit the add button, and the cell has to appear here. Only when it appears here is actually going to go to your simulation. Okay, so right here, my cell add, make sure it's there. If it's there, okay, hit continue. Then it's going to be the chemical fields. We don't want any chemical fields, so just hit continue. We will talk about chemical fields tomorrow. Okay, and here in the cell properties and behaviors, the only thing that you want is have contact and volume flex. That's the only two cell properties and behaviors that you want to add in simulation. Okay. And we can leave the center of mass because it's always turned on. But the only thing we need is contact and volume flex. Don't add anything else. So make sure those two are selected because they are not by default. So hit on contact, hit on volume flex. That's it. Then hit continue. And congratulations, your configuration is complete. And now you can play with this model. Okay, you had that, hit done. And then what you can do, you can, if your tweet was empty, you should see the name of your model here. Right click or double click there and select opening player to open that in the ComSol player. So if you're a little bit lost, here are all the instructions again. And if you don't want to spend time doing this, you can just directly download the file, open your computer, and it should be there for you to play. Okay. So what I want you to do now is to, if you have not done the model yet, build the model, hit play, and tell me what you see. Okay. I want you all to run this model and tell me what you guys are seeing. Okay. What you see at the beginning, what you see after a few seconds, and what you see after a minute. Okay. So I'll give you now time for you to just run the simulation here. Okay, so I already have a few answers, just a square made of vibrating cells. What I like is Julio's answers is square form, then rounded corners. Okay, that's very important, okay? Square cluster of cell, looks stable. Serena got the same thing. So if everything's doing right, by the way, if something went wrong in your simulation, or if you have troubles running ComSol on your computer or in the NanoHub for whatever reason, please send out a message in the chat and someone here will be able to help you, okay? We may even move you to, I don't know, we'll try to help as much as we can. Okay, more answers. A set of cells that do not fluctuate their shape in a round square shape. Square figure corners are moving slowly. Okay, that's important. After a minute, time pass 6 seconds. Okay, same. All right. So if you should all get something that looks a little bit like this, right? So you start simulation, the cells are like that. And then after a while, this happens. And after you wait a minute or two, then you see this, you see rounded corners, okay? So you can see that they are two things going on here. So you have some short-term effect and a large-term effect, okay? So on the short term, okay, all the cells start in a square shape, and what happens very quickly is that the cells inside the bulk of the tissue, okay, they kind of round up and they become round, okay? So your cells relax from a squarish and highly artificial initial condition into a more relaxed condition. So if you look at the microscope and see cells like this, there's something very odd going on, or they're not really cells. But if you look at the microscope and you see your cells that look like this outline, then there's nothing bad about it, okay? Then what you can see here in the long term, okay, and that may answer, goes in my remark, is that maybe this will take a minute, maybe it take 5 minutes, depending how fast your computer is running the simulations. But if you just keep it running for a very long time, what you should see is that you have a second relaxation process where the tissue as a whole start to relax its boundary. So just like the cells went from a square shape to a round shape, the tissue itself went from a square shape to a rounded shape as well, okay? So, and of course, this one you expect to take more time because it requires a rearrangement of the whole tissue and not only the cells. So this one happens quickly. In the long term, this eventually happens. So if you have not happened to you yet, if you just let the simulation run as I talk here, and you go check back here, it should look a little bit like this later on, okay? So those both kind of effects, though, the short-term effect and the long-term effect, are a consequence of the contact energy plugin that you have turned on in your simulation. So it's just that the effects take a little bit longer to appear on the whole tissue than in the single cell, okay? The volume flex does not have any role on this relaxation. The only thing that the volume flex plugin is just making sure that your cells do not disappear, okay? So that's the only thing that the volume is doing. Everything that you see is effect of the contact energy. Okay, so how exactly does the contact energy work and what it does to actually give this kind of effects that you see in your simulations, okay? So this contact plugin is one of the is the most used plugin, okay? I don't think I have ever seen a CC3D publication simulation or that have not used the contact energies, okay? And as I said before, the contact energies specify, okay, what would be the interaction and energy between cells of the same type and cells of different types. Oh yeah, James right, volume constraints also in almost all simulations. That's also true, okay? So if it's a contact between all the different pairwise interactions between all the cell types in our simulation, that contact energy is associated with, has to be associated with some kind of matrix of interactions between cells, okay? So it's usually called this matrix J when you describe this, okay? And this matrix interaction has here, so this is going to be cell A, cell B, cell C, cell A, cell B, cell C. So you have this matrix here, and there is a contact energy between cells of type A and A, contact energy between cells of type A and B, a contact energy between cells of type A and C. Then likewise, you have a contact energy between cells of type B, and between cells of type B and C. The contact energy between cells type of B and A is up here, okay? So you have this kind of diagonal matrices. And of course, if we talk about the matrix, that you also have those, should have those values here. But when we assume that the contact energy between cell A and B is the same as the contact energy between cell B and A, okay? So we assume that the contact energy is symmetric, okay? If you assume that the symmetry is broken, you have to justify that. And I honestly, I don't see how you can justify an asymmetry in contact energies. Okay, that would be. I don't see how you will not have this matrix to be symmetric. Okay, but it is symmetric. So when you describe them, you can omit these ones because A and B and B and A is the same thing. Okay. So in this case here, we have three cell types: cell A, cell B, and cell C. Okay, these are cell types, not cells. Then you have these 9 possible configurations. Okay. There's a good question in the chat, which will be a good topic for the discussion later. Okay, how long you have to simulate your simulation? Okay, so you have those addition energies set between all different pairwise combination of cell types. Okay, which includes the interaction between a cell with itself. Okay, and the way that you actually use those energies when you calculate those parameters when you calculate the energy of the content energy is by make a summation of a central pixel with all the pixels around it. So the way you have it is you have this double summation. The way you calculate the energy of a cell, you go over all the pixels, sorry, all the sites that make up the cell, okay? And for each site that you go over the cell, you have some kind of interaction distance of a distance of interaction or interaction range, where for that particular site, you go over all the other sites that are within this kind of green outline, and then you look, okay, what is the contact energy between this one and this one, okay? And you look at the table, okay, so let's say this is cell A, and outside the cell B, okay? So you look, okay, I have an interaction between a cell A and a cell B here, or the gray cell and the white cell, and then I put that energy here, and I sum it, and then I go to the next one here, sum, next one, sum. So I'm gonna make a summation over this energy between the gray type of cell and the white type of cell. How many times? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. Okay. Then I keep going. And one caveat is that when you're doing summation, you have interaction between a pixel, a site with a site that belongs to the same cell, you skip that. You do not count that self-interaction of the cell. Okay. If here you find another cell that's cell type C, let's say that this pixel, this site here belongs to cell C, then you'll be counting interaction between cell A and B here, and for this one, then you make you'll be using energy between cell A and cell C. Okay, so that's how it works, and you do that calculation for all the lattice sites in your cell. So of course, if you pick up a lattice site that's right in the middle of the cell, once you go to the neighborhood of that lattice sites, you'll not encounter any cell of any different cell. So in this case, the summation does not make sense. So usually this content energy only happens at the periphery of the cell, or 1 or 2 lattice site layers from its boundary. Okay. Okay. So again, so the first one is over all site coordinates belonging to the cell, and the second is over all the sites around site I. Okay, so that is how it happens like here. So you do this for all the last sites. You take a large site yourself, and you sum up the energy with all the neighboring sites that do not belong to the cell. So that's how it goes about. Okay. Types, right? So when you look at, you have the medium, right? Which the black background that you have behind your cells, and the cells of type mycel, okay? And because you only have two cell types, or contact energy matrices is only made of 3 numbers, okay? You have the, by definition, the contact energy between medium, between my cell and medium, and my cell, okay? Of course, because you only have a single medium, right? That first term here is never used, okay? So the only 2 effective contact energies that you have in your simulation is between cells and medium, and between the cells, okay? Okay, so these are the 2 parameters that we'll be playing with as we go over the simulations. And notice that those energies, notice that because we're always trying to minimize the energy in our simulations, a higher contact energy means that the cells have a lower affinity between the cells, and a low contact energy means the cells have a higher affinity in the cells. So by choosing the energies between cell and medium and between cells, we are telling, okay, do my cells like to stick more to the medium, or do they like to stick more among themselves? Okay. I just notice that I say just affinity, right? Because wherever they're gonna clump together or separate depends on other factors, depend on the circumstance of what cell is finding itself in. Okay, it depends on whether there are other cell types, what other cells is in the environment cell, and what will ultimately determine if the cells stick or not or repulse is not only the contact energy that the cell has with the other cell, but also what else is happening in the environment of that particular cell. Okay, so in our case, if we set the energy between cells and medium to be lower than the cells, then the cells will have a higher affinity to the medium than between themselves. If conversely we set the energy between cells and medium to be higher than among cells, then the cells will have a more affinity between themselves than to be between the medium. So, but of course, right now, as you play your simulation, everything by default has the same energy. So the cell and medium and cells have the same contact energy. Okay. Okay, so that is what we have right now. Okay, let's look at the chat. So there was a question. Okay, yeah. If take more neighbors, you are some more terms. Yeah, you'll be some more terms. We're gonna talk about that later. Okay. Okay, so this is briefly how the contact energy works and what you should expect when you change the relative values of the contact energy between the cells and between cells and medium. Okay, so with that in mind, let's already do our first exercise. Okay, let's go back to our simulation, and let's start increasing the contact energy between the medium and the cells. So you'll be changing the J medium and my cell from, let's say, from 10 to 20. So if you increase the contact energy between cells and medium, okay, what to expect to happen, right? So do the simulation. No, first think about what should happen, okay? Go to the code, do the simulation, and then tell me if what happened match your expectations, okay? Okay, Julio said, the other Julio said he thinks you become rounded faster. If possible, write your expectations in the chat, okay? and then run simulation. So first think about what should happen, and then run simulation. Okay. Ah, very good, Sharon. If Sharon feel the same thing, that should be more round, but you're not sure if going to round faster or you're just going to be more rounded at the end. Sinya, I think that will be a more circular geometry in last time. Okay. So please now run the simulations and tell me, does this happen or not? Or did you get a surprise? Okay, Mate, I don't know how to pronounce her name, said that Outmost Soler looks more organized when he runs simulation. Okay. So I'm gonna proceed now if everybody's fine. So what you should see is something that looks like this. Okay. Okay, so Sharon think that the initial round was faster. Okay. Yes. Okay. So did everyone got something that looks like this? Okay, so it is more rounded than the previous one. Okay, so if I go back to the previous shape, it was not that well round after even a very long time. And some of you say that they never got that rounded shape, but after we increase the energy between the cells and the medium, now is more rounded, and many of you said that you have seen it rounded up faster than before. Okay. So yeah, it makes sense. It is basically because with a higher energy between the cells and the external medium, okay, the cells want to minimize, or the tissue wants to minimize its surface with the medium, so that causes a compaction of the tissue, right? And the cells have to organize a little more, and then you see that you form a very nice single cell layer right here, the edge, right? That you did not quite had before. Before it was a little bit more rough, okay? But now it's really a very nice layer that you have outside. So it's something that one of your colleagues have noticed, okay? So, but one to also notice is that the effect that you get out of the simulation was only external and not internal, okay? So the tissue surface is much smoother than before, rounds faster than before, but inside the simulation, right, when you look at the core cells, okay, sorry, you didn't have, okay, so this image has a different resolution than before, but the amount of round that you have cells here inside is about the same as you have on the other one, okay? So that energy term affects the interaction between the cells and the medium, but does have no effect on what's happening at the bulk of the tissue, the interaction between cells among the cells. Well, the cells inside the big tissue, they don't know that there exists an external medium, and the shape of the cells internally here is exactly the same as the cells internally here, okay? Yeah, only the ultrasound most see the medium, okay? Now Guza might have the same results before. That's great. Now I have for that. Yeah, only those cells see the medium, the others do not know. What happened, and is very subtle here, is that because I want to minimize that surface, those cells get a little bit more compressed, and that leads to a slight increase in the pressure of your tissue, okay? But you cannot see visually this, but that effect is also there a little bit. So this tissue here is slightly smaller than this one. So let's now do another exercise, okay? Now, let's try to decrease the contact energy between medium and my cells from 20 to 5. So before it was 10, we increased to 20. Now let's do the reverse, okay? And as you do reverse from 10 to 5, again, first think about what do you expect to happen, okay? And does it happen and why does it happen? Okay. So please type in the chat, okay, if now decrease energy, what should happen? What are your expectations? First, tell me about in the chat, okay? And then run simulation, and then tell me what you got. So Shilai said cells start to disperse, make the surface rough, okay? Less rounds, less rounded, more cells to contact with the medium. The cell will be this weighted medium. We can wavy square, okay? Cells will have more freedom to move and become more loose. That will definitely be true for the cells at the edge, okay? Okay, now run simulation, okay? And tell me what you see. Thank you very much for being very interactive in the chat. Okay, so very good. So you're seeing that it is not round, okay? It became more regular. The cells at the edge are a little more loose, and some cells actually even detach from the tissue. So you should all, I think you all described something that looks like this. Am I correct? Yes, exactly. Okay. So that's how the cells look like. So definitely they're not round up. Actually, the cells are very happy to stay at the edge. You can barely tell the difference if you just look at the shape of the cell and compare the shape of this cell. The shape looks actually the same, right? So what's happened is that now the cells actually prefer to be in contact with the medium, okay? But you notice that even though they prefer to be in contact with the medium, they don't automatically spread the medium, right? So they just kind of, the energy with the medium and my peers are about the same, okay? I have a slight preference to be there, so this slight preference leads them to kind of make a slightly phenotypic outcome that, okay, I'm happy to get the edge. There's no need for me to undergo any rearrangement just because I'm seeing the medium. And eventually, if I detach from it, it's okay, right? So what I want to also know is, when I have already said before, is that by changing the energy between the cells on the medium, you only affect what's happening at the medium, at the interface, okay, or the outermost layer of the cells, okay? You don't have any effect on the inside the tissue. Actually, if you make a zoom in what's happening here in the bulk of this tissue, when you actually have a very high energy between cells and medium and a very low energy between cells and medium, is that you see a lot of change here at the periphery, but inside, if I just make a zoom and compare side by side, there is no difference. They look exactly the same, okay? And why this happens is because we didn't have made any change on the energy between the cells, okay? So the energy up between the cells themselves is exactly the same, and the noise of level in the system is also exactly the same. So at the bulk of the tissue, nothing happens, okay? Does it make sense? So if this makes sense now, let's try to do something a little bit more extreme. Let's try to decrease the energy between medium and cells even further, okay? So let's now make it less than 5, okay? So if I make it even less than 5, what do you expect to happen, okay? And then what you see, and uh, and do you see that? Okay. So do you expect just to have the same phenotype, just a little bit more? Would the result phenotype just be changing intensity, or you get some other phenomena arising from it? So in those exercises, it's very important that you first think about what would happen, and then you do the simulation to see what happens, okay? Because that kind of it sharpens your intuition about what should happen in COMCELL, okay? Or the cellular pots GGH methodology. So I think that you guys already have done the simulations, okay? So do you get this just a little bit more rough, or you get a more drastic change? Drastic, okay. Okay, what do you get at the end? Okay, so decrease the energy from, yeah, well, of course, you just do from 5 to 4, maybe just a little bit more rough, but let's make the energy to be like 1. Okay, so make the energy between me and myself to 1, and tell me what you get. Single cells spread out and do not have a tissue. Yes. So actually what you got here, okay, you just make your first EMT model, okay? So congratulations to all of you. What you should have get is something that looks like this. You start with a square cell. Now the cells now change their energy with the medium. Then now they like the medium, okay? And now what you have is this kind of slow spread. The cells at the edge start to move into the medium because you want to be in contact with the medium. They really like the medium because they have a low energy with that, or a high affinity with the medium. So they start to spread, and the whole tissue eventually spreads and scatter. And you can think of this simulation as a toy model for epithelial to mesenchymal-like transition, where your whole tissue undergoes an epithelial mesenchymal transition, and they, before they were part of a cohesive monolayer, and now they all become mesenchymal and they start to spread out and like this. So does it make sense? So you can read my notes here. A low value of medium cell promotes contact between cells and medium, okay? And that leads to the cell fragments to maximize the contact between the cells and the medium, okay? And that is equivalent, okay, to a loss of adhesion between cells, okay? And this can be thought as a very simple simulation of the epithelial to mesenchymal transition, all right? All right, so this is our first EMT model, okay? So we actually reproduce this spreading, okay? So before your cells made a monolayer, a very tight monolayer, right? And then you change the energy value in the model, and then the cells start to spread, okay? So this can be thought as a epithelial to mesenchymal transition change. The other thing that but we only did that by changing one energy, We just changed the energy between cells and medium. You can also explore the other contact energy term, which is the energy between the cells, okay? So why don't we do that now for our next exercise, okay? So let's set the energy between cells and medium back to 10. So that's what we had before. So I ask you all to do this, okay? Set it back to 10, run simulation to make sure that you have what you have at the beginning. And now let's decrease the energy between the cells from 10 to 1, okay? And run simulation. So let's now change the other energy between cells and cell, or my cells, okay? And let's run simulation and see what this will do to your simulation, okay? But again, before you run simulation, I want you to, don't type in the chat what you got, just tell me what you expect, okay? If you change the energy between cells from 10 to 1, what you are actually doing to the cells, okay? What you expect will happen and what you expect will not happen, okay? Please tell me in the chat what your expectations are, and after everybody tell me their expectations, then I will ask you to run simulation and tell me what you see. Okay, have a first answer. I can ask you to break that into questions. What do you expect to happen in the bulk of the tissue, and what do you expect at the boundary of the tissue? All right. Okay. Thank you very much for your writing your expectations. Now, please go to the code, make that change, and tell me what you get. Describe, okay, I got this, and this is exactly what I'm expecting, or I got this, and this was definitely not what I was expecting. Okay, Sarina said that she was wrong. Okay. So did you run simulation and got something different? Or something different that you expect? Okay, I read the answer from Sharon. Please, Sharon, now run the simulation, tell me what you see. That's a good way to describe what's going on. So the answer here may surprise you. Okay. Daisy said, it's round and compact, the tissue I think you're referring to, and the cells seem more jagged, irregular. And Julie said that she was right about the round shape, but not about other things. Okay, so what you kind of describing me is, I guess everyone is getting something that looks like this, right? So it definitely got rounder at the edge and was faster, okay? But I think the most striking feature is that the cells inside the bulk now look very regular, okay? And they're much rougher. Before they were, you expect that the cells would like to stick more to one another. So maybe you have some kind of compaction of their tissue, but maybe you did not expect that the cells will actually have this very regular shape inside them. But if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense, because what the cells want to do now, the cells want to maximize their area or the periphery with the other cells, okay? And the best way to maximize the periphery is to move away from a rounded shape into a very regular shape, okay? So that's why the cells now look like this, okay? And this is the shape of a mesenchymal cell, essentially, right? So the cells look like that, except that they are inside, surrounded by other cells, okay? So that's what's happening. So when you change the energy between the cells, and you see an effect in the bulk of the tissue as expected, because it's in the bulk of the tissue that energy it's playing, is being used, right? So the cells become more jagged, more irregular, because we want to maximize their contact with the other cells, okay? So that's is explain why the cell shapes inside the tissue becomes like that. But all of you notice that you change the dynamics between the cells inside the tissue, and yet you see a definite effect on the rounding of the tissue on the outside, okay? So why is that when you make the cells to like more in contact with each other inside, you see the tissue as a whole rounding faster from the outside and make it being more round? So why a change in adhesion in a parameter that regulates what's happening inside the tissue has an effect on the what's happening in the periphery? Okay, well, the answer is already in my slide, of course. What is happening here is that first the cells want to maximize their contact energies with the other cells, right? And that also means in the way the cellular pods work, that the cells are very happy with having regular shapes, which means that all those those side flips that will lead to a very irregular cell shape are actually okay. The cell would accept that side flip. So the cells become more fluid in this configuration, and so they can change their shapes inside more easily than they would otherwise have done before if they are forced to have a more rounded shape. So by decreasing the energy that the cells have, the contact energy that the cells have, the cells become more fluid. They can change their shape and adapt their shape more easily. And because the cells become more fluid, the tissue becomes more fluid. So the effect of the minimization of energy between the cells and the medium, which is there because they have a high energy there, because it's become more easy. Your whole tissue, because the cells inside become more fluid, is easier for you to round the tissue from the outside. So that's why the rounding outside becomes faster than what you had before. Does that make sense? So before, when you have the cell energy to 10, the cells want to become round, right? So they become a little bit more stiff, okay, inside the bulk. So it's harder to minimize the energy that cells have in the medium. Now that the energy between the cells is very low, the cells become more fluid-like inside the cells. And as a consequence, the external rounding of the tissue becomes much more easy, because you're rounding something that is fluid instead of rounding something that's more glassy-like, okay? So here you see that you change a parameter that should only affect what's happening inside the tissue, but you also have a side effect that the tissue as a whole is able to round better, easier. Does it make sense? Okay, I hope it makes sense. So let's now go to the another exercise. Okay. So now let's make, so we make the cell-cell adhesion energy to 1, and that leads to the fluidization of the tissue. And then you make the medium and cell energy to 1, and that leads to the spread, okay, EMT. Now let's make both equal to 1, okay? If you make both equal to 1, both very low, you have now two effects that should happen. The first parameter, when you make the cell medium equals to 1, it should promote the fragmentation of the tissue, okay, because not cells like medium. But when you change the addition between cells and cells to 1, that should be promote the cohesion of the tissue and the fluidization of the cells, okay? So now, if you do the simulation with 1 and 1 here, what will happen, okay? So now you have some kind of two things that seems to be kind of competing between themselves, okay? So I want you to think about, okay, what to expect to happen, okay? So please write in the chat your expectations, then run simulation and tell me what you see. So Julio said, maybe same as having 10 and 10, okay? What do you guys think? Do you think that is reasonable or not? Or maybe the tissue break into clusters, okay? Fatima, same behavior as what? As the EMT, or the same behavior as I had before? Oh, very good point by Melaine. Will the temperature now become relatively much larger? Yes. Okay. So that's what Melaine wrote, answer what Julio wrote before. Okay, so thanks for your answers. Now that you all thought about it, please run the simulation and tell me what you see. Okay, Sarina said that she got more crazy wiggly cells and rough outline tissue. Stephen, that you only have one medium cell, okay? So the energy between medium is never taken into account in your calculations. So the contact energy can only calculate energies between different objects. The medium is a single object, so that energy there never plays a role on anything. So you should all get something that maybe look like this. All right. So you still have the same effect that the bulk tissue, it just looked the same as before. The only difference is that the outside the tissue now looks very rough, but the cells do not spread, okay? So yes, now the two energies are the same, right? But the temperature is much higher than what you had before, as Malena noticed, okay? So what you are doing simulation is the same thing as have the initial simulation, but then increase the energy from 10 to 100. That would be the same thing. So if you take your old simulation of energies of 10 and 10, and increase the temperature, what you expect to happen, okay? What you expect to happen is that everything is going to be more rough, okay? Everything will be more wiggly, but you do not necessarily get the empty transition because you did not get the empty transition when you have all the energy equal to 10. So if you make all the energy equal to 1, you also will not get it because the relative energy, difference in energies between the cells and the medium are still the same. So again, all that matters is the relative values between those energy terms, okay? So if this outcome surprise for you, okay, why this effect cancels this effect, think about your initial simulation when the energies were 10, and just think about what will happen with that simulation if you increase the temperature to 100, which should have the exact same output as this. Actually, you can check that. Make those energies back to 10, make the temperature to 100, run simulation, you should get exactly the same thing as you have here. Right? So, well, basically what I'm saying is that I'm basically driving the point here that it has in my next slide, right? So the relative energies here and here are the same, but they look very different, okay? And you guys already answered. We already been talked about that. Even though the relative energies are the same, what is different between here is that the temperature is 10 here and the temperature is 10 here. So relative temperature, this is much higher and this is much lower. So what is going on here from theoretical point of view? Okay, and then I'm going to go a little bit mathy and physicsy. Okay, for in front of you is that every time you do a spin flip, you have to side flip, side copy attempt, and calculate the changing energy. If the energy between your contact energies are 10, you're usually maybe in this range of the typical changing energy associated with each flip. But if you make your energies to be 1, okay, 10 times lower, you're actually moving here, okay? Your changing energies are usually much smaller than you had before. So you're basically accepting much more side copies than what you were doing before. So expect that you go from here to here, that you'll be kind of changing the behavior. Everything's going to look more rough because you are basically accepting more side copy attempts than you had before. So one thing you can do is that if you decrease the energy between the contact energy between cells and between cells and medium from 10 to 1, but you also make your temperature 10 times smaller and make your temperature back to 1, then this curve here, the exponential have a different shape, right? And if you now do your simulation with this one, now your acceptance probability to be around here. So you'll be about the same as you had before. So if you run the simulation again, and now set the temperature also from 10 to 1, you should get the same results as before. So that's just the exercise I'm proposing here, okay? So if you do that, do you get the same results as before or not? Okay, so this is the idea. So please now make your keep the energy between cells and medium to 1, and making now your temperature also equal to 1. And then you should get the same results as you had before. So if you run simulation, you should get this exactly the same result as you had before, okay, like this. So Stephen, it didn't get the same results. Stephen, you should actually get exactly the same results. Make sure that you save your change to the configuration file and run it again. Just run one more time and see if you 1, 1, 1, you get same results as 10, 10, 10. Okay. So Guzmai said that she got the same results as before we said 1, everything to 1. And actually you should get same results if you make everything equal to 99 or everything equal to 37, okay? Because all it matters is the ratio between those parameters. Okay, so for here, I wait a very long time for this to happen, okay? But we will compare this one with this one, it should be the same result. Okay. All right, so that's another way to stress that everything, what really matters is the relative values and between the parameters themselves and also between the parameters with respect to the noise level in the system. Hmm. Steven said that when he does one-on-one, everything happens slower than when you do 10, 10, 10. Yes, yes. Okay, Pedro has got the answer. We changed the contact energies, but we did not change the energy of the volume of the cells. So there is still that factor, the conservation of volume of the cell, that's still the same, that has not been changed. So it's true, the things should happen a little bit slower when do one-on-one. Yes. Thank you, Pedro. Okay, I didn't thought about that. Yeah, you still have this extra energy terms the volume. Okay. Well, Sharon, if you make all the energies to be 0, 0, it is then you basically have that you basically turn off the contact energy. right? So now the cells will be free to fragment with no consequences. Okay. Basically, that's what's going on. So let's go back to another exercise, okay? And it will be the last one for the EMT, okay? So in exercise 2.2.3, we set parameters to, okay, we actually set it to 1, right? 3, 10, and temperature 10, and we get our EMT transition, right? And the reason that we have our cells to spread is that the cells prefer to be in contact with the medium rather than be in contact with themselves, and you can actually spread the tissue in this way. Okay, so what is another way that you can induce fragmentation of the tissue? Is there another way to achieve the same end result by changing something else? Okay. Okay, so let's try to do the following. So here, the both energies before were 10, and we decrease the contact energy between cells in the medium, and that induced the cells to actually prefer to go and be in contact with the medium. Another way for you to induce fragmentation is maybe we'll keep this energy between cells and medium at 10, and we increase the energy between the cells. So the cells do not like each other. So here you're you're changing the preference of the cell. So the cell now likes the medium. And here, if you do that, you're seeing that the cells dislike themselves. It's not that they like the medium, it's just that they hate each other. So to say. So if you do this simulation here, and then you do this simulation, do you get the same outcomes, or you get something that is different than before? So please write in the chat what you expect to happen here and what you expect to happen here. Do you expect the exact same output, or you expect some kind of different qualitative difference between them? And if you do expect some difference, what will be the difference between those two simulations? Yeah, you keep the lambda value of the volume of the cells the same. Yes. The temperature is still 10 for them, for those. So set temperature 10. You can run this one again if you want to remind yourself how it looked like. But I can just go back here. That's how it looked like. And then set this back to 10, and now increase the energy between cells. If you do that, what do you expect to happen? Will you get the same result, or the results will be different? Okay, let me write. Okay. So it seems like a stronger and faster effect. Okay. Differently. All right. So I already tell you, yeah, there will be a difference between those two. Okay. If you just look at the end result and not how fast it goes, what will be the difference in this end result? Yes, one will be faster than the other. We can tell, okay, which one will be faster, okay? And besides which one will be faster, which one, what will be the other difference between those two outputs? Okay, actually, I don't know how to pronounce her name. Mate, uh, was spot on. Well, just let's run the simulation. Let's run this and tell me what you see. Okay. Okay. So now run the simulation. Okay. Look at what's going on and tell me, do you notice any difference in the way the simulation looks? Okay. So if you run simulation, you should still get a kind of EMT kind of like process, right? The cell should still spread to the medium, okay? But have you noticed any difference in the shape of the cells from this simulation than the simulation that you had before? Yes, Homia and Julio, they said they're seeing more rounded cells, and that's also what I get when I run simulations. So hopefully everybody also gets the same output. So in the first method, decreasing this energy, the cells looks very loose, okay? And the second, the cell looks very round. So that's how it looks like for the first method, and that's looks how it looks for the second method. Because basically, when you change different energies, you are actually inducing different process, right? In the first, the cells want to maximize the surface of the medium, so they want to go to the medium. And while in the second method, the cells are just kind of avoiding themselves, and therefore they go to medium. They do not necessarily like the medium, but they really dislike being next to each other, right? So you see a difference in the cell shape. Now, if you're talking about modeling an epithelial to mesenchymal transition, right? And which one of those models would be best? Is the one on the left or the one on the right? And why? Okay, we have some kind of split, right? So half of you vote for the left, and half of you vote for the right. Okay. Don't worry about using the how fast it goes as a criteria, because we don't have yet a way to match the time scale simulation with the time scale of the experiments. So faster or slower is more convenience as now. And actually doesn't make much sense because we don't have another process to compare to the speed. So the criteria should be only be the shape of the cells, okay, right now. And some of you correctly said, okay, maybe the right looks better because the cells are more round and the cells are round, but this is a epithelial to mesenchymal transition. So the cell should go from an epithelial-like morphology to mesenchymal-like morphology. And the cells on the left definitely has a more mesenchymal-like morphology than the cells on the right. Because remember, the cell that make a mesenchyme, they're more like spread, right? They have a regular shape. They are more star-like, their shape than a round, compact. So if you are want to model epithelial to mesenchymal transition, we want to make sure that our cells at the end of the process would look mesenchymal, right? And the cells on the left here, this looks like mesenchymal cells, and not this one, okay? So in general, okay, this one on the left is better, okay, because you probably match more experimental situations than the one on the right. You may have a biological situation where the cells lose contact and spread, and they still individually look very roundish. In that case, this would be a good model. But in general, if you talk about the cells become mesenchymal, then definitely the one on the left would fit more experimental results and situations than the one on the right. But if you want to, well, here already see that there are two ways to cause disaggregation, right? Either the cells really have a preference to go outside, right? And there's no reason for it to clump inside, or the cells, something changed in the cell, they completely lost adhesion. They not only lost adhesion, but for some reason their actomizing cortex in their surface becomes much more strong, right? So they just kind of detach from each other and become round. So maybe something like this will happen if you, for some reason, induce all your epithelial cells to divide at the same time. Because cells in epithelium, when they divide, they actually lose adhesion and become round before they undergo mitosis. So if you make all your cells in epithelium undergo mitosis at the same time, suppose that this is a double experiment, you see something like this, at least momentarily. And then cells divide, and they should aggregate back. Okay, let me see how I'm going with time. Okay, so I'll try now to, in 10, 15 minutes, talk about what is the effect of contact energy on single cell shapes, okay? Okay, so for the next set of slides, I'd like to talk a little bit more about how the contact energy works, okay? And use the single cell simulations as an example. So for this one, I want you all to, let me go straight to this. Instead of building this model from scratch, I want to just go to student materials and download the 2.2.7.zip code file and open that, okay? Or if you want to do, not open that, just look at my slides, that's fine as well. You can do this exercise later over lunch, okay? So please download that material, open so you have the code in front of you, okay? And you can actually do the exercise I propose later. So what I want to now is talk, revisit the contact energy. Okay, so have been explained what the contact energy does when you talk about cells interacting in multiple other cell types. And what you have in our previous simulation was many cells of the same type, and so you have the interaction between cells and cells, and also the interaction between cells and the medium. So you are talking about two energy terms that are very important to set the final morphology of your tissue, okay? So again, just revisiting what the way that this works is that you set those outer contact energies, and the way that I use to calculate the total energy, contact energy of the cell is that you go over all the lattice sites that make up your cell. So this is the cell, this is the lattice sites in gray that make up, okay? And then you go over the first sum here, you go over all those lattice sites, and for each one of all those lattice sites that you're going over, you also go over to a second summation over all the sites around that, and you find sites that belong to different cells, and then you read this matrix and you add that to your energy, okay? Okay, but of course, here I just said that you have this kind of interaction energy in this range that in this case is made up of 20 let's size around this one. So, but this range here can actually be changed to be either higher or lower, right? Is something that you will explore here now, okay? So if now let's start to understand what the contact energy does when we talk about a simulation of a single cell, okay? When you have just a single cell, or contact matrix kind of looks like what you had before, right? You have just a medium and my test cell, okay? So we have only 3 unique terms, but because we only have one cell, we have only one contact energy to worry about. It's just a contact energy between the cell and the medium, right? Because we don't have a second cell, this other one does not matter. And because medium is just one object, right? Or one non-object, he also never takes account. So this is a simple simulation because we are only exploring the effects of a single parameter, right? So if you have downloaded the zip file, okay, you should already have these configurations. If you want to, if you have not downloaded, you can just go back to the simulation that you have from yesterday and make sure you have all those parameters set to be exactly like this, okay? Turn off the surface, turn off the length, okay? Make your temperature 10, target volume of cell to 1,000, the lambda volume to 10, and just run simulation, right? If you just run simulation, you should get something that looks like this, okay? And now what I want to do in this simulation is to actually make change to the addition value between the cell and the medium, okay? Let's try first to increase the contact energy between the cell and the medium to higher values. So right now it's 10, let's make it 50 or 100, okay? And tell me what you expect to happen to your cell if you increase the contact energy that it has with the medium. Should you expect a change in cell shape, a drastic change, or just a slightly change? What do you expect to happen if you just increase the energy? So again, write on the chat what you expect to happen. If it's nothing, just say nothing. If it's something else, you'd say what something else you expect. And then run simulation and tell me what you see. Oh, very small acceptance in flips. Why that? Exactly, that's exactly what you should get. So please run simulation with contact energy of 50. And if you run that, the shape of the cell will be very round. You get a perfect rounded cell, but the number of mental fluctuations decrease. You have much less left side changes because each left side change that you have is highly costly because your the energy associated with that is much higher, so you accept much less side flips than you had before. So your cell still rounds, okay, but it moves much less than you had before, okay. And of course, the cell grows a little bit, gets a round shape, then it takes a much eventually it rounds, and after it rounds, it satisfies both the volume constraint and the surface constraint, and then it's very hard to accept any other side flip that you had before, so the cell becomes more stiff, okay? You have a stiffer cell, which associated with some kind, you can interpret this as increase the surface tension that the cell has with the external medium, okay? All right, so now let's try to do the reverse. Let's try to decrease the energy between the cells and the medium, okay, to lower values. If you now decrease that from 10 to lower values, what do you expect will happen to the shape of the cell? Tell me in the chat what you expect. And after you tell me your expectations, let's run the simulation. So Sharon's were more dynamic change, yes. Okay. What else? Maybe a harder time keep its volume. Maybe actually it's to be able to keep its volume. There's something else that will happen. Like amoeba, in what sense? Less round on average. Why is less round? So, okay, thank you for your answers. I want to go a little bit quicker now. Just run simulation by setting the energy to 1 and tell me what you get. If you make now this energy to 1, tell me what you get. And after you do that simulation with energy equals to 1, I want you to make the energy to be 0 and tell me what you get. Sheila, very good remark. The cell would expose more surface to the medium, yes. So regular shape for individual cells, okay. Yeah, we're talking about simulation, a single simulation. So you expect a more irregular shape. Yes, okay. Now, in also migration, because you're accepting more side flips, so the cell has a bigger chance of having increasing, it increases diffusivity, right? It diffuses more than me. It's not that it's migrating, because migrating implies a directed movement. It's just that it has a higher diffusion over space. Now make your energy to 0. So if you make your energy to 0, exactly 0, what do you get? You get just the same thing, or you get a very drastic change? It does not have a surface anymore. You just turn off that plugin. You only have the volume plugin, okay? So let me show you the results. If you make your energy to be 1, the cell actually does not care about its surface, right? So you get a very rough shape, very similar to the shape of the cell that you have in the bulk of the tissue when you make the addition between cells to be very low. So it's very similar, but here you get same effect on with the background because the cell is by itself, okay? But if you make the energy between cells, the contact energy between cells and me to be 0, right? Now the cell has no, it doesn't care about the surface anymore, okay? It does not want to minimize its surface with the medium. There is no, the smoothing effect that the contact energy has is not there anymore. So the cell is free to have whatever surface it wants. And what you have the fragmentation of your cell. Well, in the case, it loses addition with the, well, it just loses coherence. It loses its surface tension, right? It has a 0 surface tension with the medium. And, well, we assume that the cell also have no internal organelles, and then it just fragments. Okay, so this, again, would be a good model for the apoptosis, if the cell undergo apoptosis, how the cell will look like, and then it's going to disappear. So if said that the contact energy of the cell to be 0 to everything, that's what the cell will do. They will explode, and there will be a necrotic cell. That's a way to model a necrotic event. Okay. well, a necrotic cell is a cell that doesn't undergo necrosis, right? So it will start doing that and then disappear. So that's what will happen. Okay. So now for the last part, I would like to talk a little bit about that boundary thing that you had before. So we said that the way that this contact energy works is by making a sum over all the lattice sites and then make a second sum around each one of those lattice sites with its neighborhood, right? So I said that its neighborhood would be like this, and that's the default one neighborhood that you have in CompCell, is that neighboring order parameter. But you actually can define this neighborhood to be bigger or smaller than what you have here. So this neighborhood that you have here is actually defined by the parameter neighbor order that you have in your contact plugin, okay? And if the neighbor order is just going to be just the first layer of sites next to your site, the second layer of sites next to your original site, the third layer of sites next to your original site, okay? So this is how the neighbor order looks like. So in one, the neighbor order of a 0 is with no neighbors, right? Neighboring order of 1 means that you have those 4 cells. So this in 2D Cartesian coordinates, that to be your first neighboring order. The second neighbor order, you will be actually looking at the first one and also those cells at the sites at the edge. A third neighbor order will be looking at those sites here. A fourth neighbor order will be looking over all those ones here. So you calculate your energy over 20 sites, okay? If you go to a 7 neighbor order, then you'll be looking at this kind of range here. And then you actually, when you do your calculation here, you'll be summing over 36 lattice sites instead of 20 lattice sites. And of course, if you are in 3 dimensions in a Cartesian coordinate, that you have the different numbers because now you're actually looking at things on the other axis. Okay. So by default, CompCell use a neighboring order of 4, which is actually the optimal size for of neighbor order for 2-dimensional simulation in main applications. For my personal use, when I use a 3-dimensional simulations, I like to use a neighboring order of 5. I think for 3D, a 5 is better than 4. But basically, what's happening here is that when you set a neighboring order of 4, it's not that you're making calculation only on those number 4 here. You're including everything that falls within this region. Okay, and the way that you define that in the code is by the neighboring order tag that you have here in the XML. So we have been a little bit of talks about neighboring order on section 1.4 yesterday. This is the neighbor order that you're talking about. So for the exercise now, I would like to do 2 quick exercises. The first one is, okay, let's keep the energy of the cell to be 10 and increase and decrease the neighbor order. Let's make a neighbor order of 1 and see what happens. And let's make a neighbor order of 7 and see what happens, okay? So, and notice that when you look at your CompCell 3D code on XML, you have 2 tags called neighbor order. The first one is for the site flips, and the second one is for the contact. You want to change the one that is under contact, okay? So if you make a neighboring order of 1, what will be expect the cell to look like versus a neighboring order of higher neighboring order? Does anyone have an expectation? So if you run simulation with a neighbor order of smaller than 4 and higher than 4, you should get results that look like this. Okay. If you make a neighboring order of 1, your cell looks very rough, okay, like this, compared to the neighboring order of 4. And if you make a neighboring order of 7, the cell actually rounds better than what you have a neighboring order of 4. Okay, so why does this happen? So while you think about this happens, you may also notice that those results seems to be equivalent to the results that we had when we decrease the energy, the content energy of the cell of the medium. Okay, so this looks like this. And this one seems to be equivalent to what happened when you increase the energy of the cells with the medium. Okay. Yeah, there are a few lattice sites to sum over, right? And when you make a decision about how smooth your cell surface will be, okay, that decision is made only locally. So what you have is that the cell becomes these very sharp edges here that you had before. When you make a neighboring order much higher, you're taking into account the curve, wider range of your simulation space when you make the site flips. So your cells will be, you have the smoothing effect that the content energy has will be more long range. So you end up with a more rounded cell than what you had before. So at 4 degrees very locally, okay, so you still round your surface, but you it's not kind of quite perfect. And here you are smoothing over a wider surface, a wider range. So the cell as a whole looks much more smooth than we had before. Okay, while you make a neighbor order of 1 or 2, you start to get this kind of each lattice sites only see the immediate lattice sites, so you don't have the smoothing effect anymore. The other thing that's happening is that when you sum over a lattice site of 1, you're just at most making 4 summations, while when you make a neighbor order of 7, you're summing over more lattice sites. So the weight of the content energy is much higher when you have a higher neighboring order than when you have a low neighboring order. Okay. Please, someone in the help Sharon with the size of the control and scroll we should do. Okay. So talking now about this size, when you make the neighbor order bigger, you actually sum over more large sites, and make the order smaller, you're summing over lower large size. If this is true, then there should be a way to compensate for this effect, right? So maybe if you do so that could be the next exercise. Let's try to compensate this effect of summing over more or less lattice sites. So if you have a neighbor order of 1, where you have at most 4 site pairs, compared to the 20 site pairs that you have when you have a neighboring order of 4, what you can do, you can adjust this contact of the cell and the medium to be scale proportionally, to be also 5 times higher. So if you run the simulation here, you should compensate and you get the same result as you have before. So before you have this result, so if you now increase the energy that this cell has with the medium to compensate the loss of summation, will you get the same result as this or not? The other thing you can do, you can now also compensate the additional lattice size summation that you have when you have a higher neighboring order by decreasing the energy. So if we scale that 20 to 36, right, and now we use a lower energy, would this lower energy with this high neighboring order give you the same results from here to here, or not. Okay, so that is the last exercise I want you to do. Because we are kind of running out of time, I want to, you can still do this exercise, okay? I'm gonna tell you already that the results will be different. Actually, when you run this exercise, this is the output that you have. So I compensated I use a lower neighbor order and increase the contact energy to compensate, but the result that I have here is not the same as I have here. So why we did not get this? And the same thing here, I decrease the contact energy, and here, okay, maybe this kind of work, but this one definitely did not work very well. Okay. And the reason that it did not work very well to reproduce this one is that you're still, when you do your side flips, you're still looking very closely to the neighborhood of your lattice sites, okay? So that side flip is still looking very close to your cell. So even though you have a much higher adhesion energy of your cell with the medium, the contact energy term is only looking very locally. And so it has no sense of what the curvature of the cell is at the long ranges. So what happened here is that you do get a smooth cell, but only locally smooth. So your cell still looks very squarish than you had before. So that is why it's much better to use a higher neighboring order, because when you use a high neighboring order, okay, you are ensuring that your cell have a very smooth surface. Then you use a lower one. So ideally, what you would like to have is make the neighboring order as big as possible. Okay. However, there are two problems: that the higher you make your neighboring order for your contact energy, the more sites you're summing for each spin flip. So you're actually slowing down your simulation. So you don't want to do that. So the best compromise in 2D is to use a neighboring order of 4. But be aware that if you change your neighboring order, right, for whatever reason, you also have to make a change in all the values of your contact energies. Otherwise, because you are risking to make your contact energy to much more stronger or much more weaker than what you had before. Okay. The other drawback of making your contact neighboring order much bigger is that if the range of your contact order is much bigger than the actual size of the cell, you may induce your cell to disappear because of that. And that is why when you're doing the simulation of the volume constraint, if you make the target volume of the cell to be much small, like below 20, the cell disappear. And the reason the cell was disappearing is that the contact energy of the cell was now looking at a neighborhood that was as big as the size of the cell, and the best way to minimize that energy was just to make the cell disappear. Okay, so with that, I kind of they have covered everything that I want to cover with contact energies, right? So hopefully now you have a better understanding of how the constraints work inside COMCEL, that what you're actually COMCEL is doing when you calculate the contact energies, and hopefully you have a better understanding of what are their effects on the shape of our cells and what are the effects of contact energy on the shape of the cell, and also in the interaction of the cell with other cells. Okay, so please take your time to fill up the questionnaire about this module. Okay, pop-up you're gonna show up right now, and now I will actually hand the Zoom over to Hayden, because I think he wants to make a quick announcement about the hackathons, if I'm not mistaken. So please take the time to answer the question, how you feel about Module 2.2, And I thank you for your attention and your patience, and I hope this was helpful to you.